Once we grant ourselves the power to redefine, we also grant ourselves the power to divide. The creeds form the parameters of orthodoxy. Therefore, anyone outside of those parameters is outside of orthodoxy. So if we are allowed a shifting goalpost, then truth becomes subjective. Within Protestantism, the noble intent of Sola Scriptura, to return to the purity of the biblical witness, carried with it an unintended consequence, the isolation of interpretation. And to be fair, the original reformers never originally intended for the Bible to be read in a vacuum. They held the creeds and the church fathers in high esteem, viewing them as valuable guides. In theory, Scripture stood as the supreme authority, while tradition functioned as a respected subordinate. And yet, this structure, while noble in theory, rests on a fatal flaw, for it leaves one major question unanswered, and that's who decides? Who has the final say when a new interpretation of Scripture challenges the traditional understanding? If tradition is truly subordinate, it can always be overruled by a persuasive new reading of the supreme text. The subordinate authority has no real power to bind. The result is a system with a constitution but no Supreme Court. Without a living final arbiter to settle disputes, every reader, every pastor, every synod ultimately becomes its own high court, judging not only Scripture's meaning but also how much weight to give the very traditions meant to guard it. Check out episode 7 as well as episode 11 for more in this regard. The system of Sola Scriptura was designed to honor Scripture, but by removing the living authority that canonized and interpreted it, it inadvertently made every man's conscience the ultimate magisterium. Scripture, detached from an interpretive authority, became vulnerable to the same semantic drift that has overtaken the rest of modern language. The text remained inspired, but its meaning became negotiable. When words no longer possess fixed reference, even sacred words begin to splinter. A verse can be lifted out of context, polished like a gem, and used to build an entire theology upon a single phrase. That is the essence of proof texting, the fragmentation of the word into fragments of words. The Bible becomes not a unified revelation, but a field of linguistic raw material from which one can construct nearly anything. The Reformation's initial fracture was followed by hundreds, if not thousands more, each claiming fidelity to the same Scripture. One group emphasizes faith, another works. One exalts grace, another obedience. All appeal to the same verses, yet their interpretive grammars differ. Each uses the same vocabulary of salvation, but inhabits a different semantic world. The result is not merely diversity, it's dissonance. Every pastor becomes, in practice, a mini local magisterium. The pulpit becomes the seat of linguistic authority, and because there is no universal standard to measure meaning and no living body to preserve context, every church can redefine terms as it pleases. Now, to be fair, it could be objected that this description doesn't apply equally to all forms of Protestant church governance. Presbyterians, for instance, appeal to their network of elders and presbyteries as a safeguard against isolated interpretation, and Congregationalists hold that authority rests in the gathered body rather than in a single pulpit. And yet, I would like to point out that these models only redistribute the same problem. They do not actually resolve it. In the congregational model, the final authority still lies in consensus, the will of the majority rather than the living standard above it, and consequently, truth becomes merely what most can agree on. And as to the Presbyterian model, authority extends outward but not upward, a collection of local voices without a universal voice that can actually judge decisively. The presbytery may restrain one pastor's error, but it cannot claim to speak infallibly for all. These structures can restrain local error, but absent a universal living authority, they cannot adjudicate finally for all. In both cases, the pattern remains.